slums of Shaolin, Wu-Tang Clan strikes again. The RZA, the Jizza, old dirty bastard, Inspector Deck, Raekwon the chef. You guard, Ghostface Killer, and the Method.
M-E-T-H-O-D, man. M-E-T-H-O-D, man. M-E-T-H-O-D, man. M-E-T-H-O-D, man. Hey, you, get up.
So this video is about a fighter that I consider a top candidate for Fighter of the Year 2017. One Milan, the Method Man, Melindo, aka El Metodico. Yeah, of course, Method Man in Spanish, basically. 37-2 with 13 knockouts. The current IBF light flyweight champion of the world. It's coming up against a very, very difficult opponent. December 31st. Ryoichi Taguchi of Japan. The WBA light flyweight champion of the world. In the year 2017, he has two very, very signature victories. First one happened in May. He was coming off of a six-month layoff after defeating one Tirapan Utaida, aka Farlan Sakririn Jr. of Thailand, to win the interim version of the IBF title. Competed against one Akira Yegashi for the full version of the IBF light flyweight championship. And against Yegashi, a fighter who has fought the likes of champions like Pedro Guevara, Kazuto Ioka, Edgar Sosa, Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez, Javier Mendoza. Melindo went in there and knocked Akira Yegashi out in the first round. Technical knockout, yes. Dropped him multiple times. Forced the referee's hand in stopping it. But it's a very big victory, man. He just defeated, he knocked out in the first round three-weight champion, the guy that is a former lineal flyweight champion, the man that Gonzalez defeated to become the lineal flyweight champion at the time, as well as WBC champion. Lineage that goes back to Manny Pacquiao, funny enough. He followed that up. He followed the Yegashi victory up with his first defense. You'd think, first defense, okay, he's gonna get a gimme fight, right? He's back in his home country of the Philippines, in Cebu City, Philippines, his hometown. Matter of fact, that's where he lives at. But no, he takes on the former WBA super champion, Heki Butler of South Africa. Heki Butler, very skilled technician, very slick defensive boxer, pot-shotting type boxer, the type of boxer that, you could definitely see a lot of American stylistic influence upon. And Milan Melindo was able to successfully outbox Butler enough and drop him in the 12th round to score a 12-round split decision over Butler. Now, of course, Butler's team protested the decision. There were a fair few number of people that didn't agree with the decision, thinking that that Butler actually deserved to defeat Melindo, the Method Man Melindo. But ultimately, even though they were in talks to have a rematch, Melindo and Butler, a bigger name came a calling. Ryoichi Taguchi of Japan, a fighter who was previously in talks to fight against Kosei Tanaka, the former WBO champion, former WBO flyweight champion, former WBO strawweight champion, has since vacated both that strawweight belt and just recently vacated his light flyweight belt, which now belongs to Angel Acosta of Puerto Rico, who just defeated Juan Alejo for the vacant version of the title. Taguchi was in talks to fight against Tanaka. Tanaka wound up vacating the belt after suffering a couple of injuries in his last fight, his most recent fight, which was gonna put him on the shelf, and he was having trouble making weight. at this point in time. So he decided to vacate his title. He's going to be moving up to flyweight. Tanaka has talked about winning 5 titles in 5 different weight classes. So it looks like he's on his way towards his 3rd one in only 11 fights, as a matter of fact. But Taguchi recently had a 9th round TKO win over Robert Barrera. Previous to that, he didn't fight in 2017. His fight previous to that was in December 31st of 2016, where he managed to get a split draw against Carlos Canizales of, where is Canizales from? Canizales was from Venezuela. So he managed to get the split draw against Canizales, scored a nice 9th round technical knockout over Robert Barrera, coming in here against Milan Melindo. I favor Taguchi to beat Melindo. This will have been, pretty sure this is Taguchi's 7th defense of his title, and of course it's unification, WBA and IBF. The winner of this fight, incidentally, will become the Ring Magazine champion. But the reason why I'm focusing a little bit more so on Melindo as opposed to Taguchi here is because, as I've mentioned in a couple other videos, Melindo's been proving me wrong. I thought that Yagashi was going to be too much for Melindo. Matter of fact, I thought, going all the way back to last year, I thought that Tirapong Utaida, a.k.a. Falan Sakredin Jr., might be a little bit too much for Melindo. To me, that was more of a 50-50 fight, but Melindo proved otherwise when he managed to pretty cleanly defeat Utaida. A competitive fight, but a clear win for Melindo. Against Yagashi, blew Yagashi out in the 1st round. You definitely have to weight that win, considering the fact that nobody had ever done that to Yagashi before. Gonzalez and Guevara did successfully stop Yagashi, yes, but Yagashi had been on a pretty good run. I mean, since then, got a couple of wins since then. Most notably against Javier Mendoza to win that title. But against Melindo, it just got blown out the water. Hecky Butler, of course, recently had his title defeat at the hands of Byron Rojas at strawweight to dethrone him. But since then, racked up some nice victories. Has signature victories over the likes of Simpiwe Konko, Chung Xiaosheng, and Kusanati Joyi. And going up against Melindo, I thought he had outboxed Melindo. Melindo proved me otherwise. If Melindo defeats Taguchi, he'll have proved me otherwise 3 times. Not only just myself, but he was actually the underdog going into the Yagashi fight. And I'm pretty certain he was the underdog going into the Butler fight. Don't necessarily quote me on that, however, because that was a pretty close fight. I mean, that was a pretty close fight looking at it from an on-paper perspective beforehand. And I'm not necessarily sure what the odds were before. I know they were reasonably close though. I'm not sure exactly who wound up being the favorite as it led into it. I'd imagine Melindo might have been, considering the fact that he was fighting it at home. He was a Filipino fighter in the Philippines. For once, or for once recently, a lot of his major fights have actually been outside of the Philippines, even though most of his career has taken place there. But here against Taguchi, he's fighting away from home. He's fighting in Taguchi's hometown, in Taguchi's home country. And in Taguchi, he's fighting a guy that I think stylistically he has a bit of a disadvantage against. Melindo's a guy that's kind of a stand and deliver boxer, power puncher, a counter puncher. Taguchi will give you opportunities to counter because he is a very high volume fighter and isn't necessarily a huge knockout artist, like a huge knockout puncher. But he's a very good body puncher, mixes up very nicely between the body and the head. And generally, Taguchi tends to struggle the most with guys who are very much stick and move type fighters. Melindo can stick and move reasonably well. He actually did it fairly well against Hecky Butler, who he was able to kind of use his foot speed against in order to force Butler to kind of chase after him, which Butler isn't necessarily prone to do. Butler tends to like to be on the back foot and be trying to circle around his opponents, kind of pivot around them. But Melindo forced Butler a little bit out of his comfort zone and was able to get the victory because of it. Might he be able to force Taguchi to follow him and be able to counter him effectively? Possibly. But generally, I do favor Taguchi's very, very high work rate. The guy averages, 80, 90, even 100 punches around in some of his fights. And when he's ratcheting off combination after combination, he's extremely, extremely difficult to dissuade. Taguchi's only recent loss was to Naoya Inoue. Naoya Inoue, who is a former WBC light flyweight champion and a current WBO super flyweight champion. Pretty one of the biggest names at super flyweight. You know, with a man who a lot of people would insist would have or insisted would have knocked out Roman Gonzalez before Gonzalez managed to be knocked out by Shisaketsu Rungvisai. A lot of people feel that he is head and shoulders the best super flyweight in the world. So, incidentally, for Taguchi to actually go the distance with him and lose a decision in the midst of actually winning a couple of rounds against Inoue, that shows a very high level of pedigree of boxing for Ryoichi Taguchi. Melindo's probably biggest signature opponent, who he incidentally lost to as well, is Juan Francisco Estrada. Estrada, not necessarily a heavy-handed fighter, but he did manage to down Melindo in the 11th round, and otherwise pretty comprehensively outboxed Melindo. Melindo, I think, holds a slight size advantage over Taguchi, even though he is the shorter fighter and the shorter armed fighter. He's a short, stocky guy, though. He's a little bit of a heavier puncher. I think the first round TKO over Higashi kind of proves that. He really throws a lot into his punches, but he's not necessarily a knockout artist necessarily. But it's really about the fact that he's really just putting all of his weight into. But it almost reminds me of Juan Baby Bull Diaz, where Diaz would really throw his weight into every shot that he threw, and a lot of that would when he was able to land, he would actually wobble some guys. He managed to rock one Manuel Marquez, who has definitely has a proven chin. So you'd think, well, if Baby Bull Diaz is this pity pat puncher, how is he able to rock Marquez? It's just the fact that he's putting so much weight into all of his shots. That's kind of what Melindo does, albeit with a less aggressive style than Diaz. It tends to be more sit back, kind of trying to pick and choose his spots to counter. But as I said before, if Melindo defeats Taguchi, this will have been the third time in a row that he's proven me wrong, the third time in a row that he's proven the odds makers wrong, and the third time in a row that he'll have beaten arguably a top 5, top 7 level fighter at a given weight class in order to do so. Between knocking out a very tough to knock out Higashi and outpointing a very tough to outpoint Heki Butler, should he defeat Taguchi in Japan. Taguchi, a very hard to outwork fighter, a fighter that, in spite of the earlier loss that he had, only recently Naoya Inoue had defeated him. And that's a big accomplishment, as far as I'm concerned, for Melindo. Couple other fighters that may be in the running for Fighter of the Year are the likes of Kenshiro, who I'll speak about in another video. He has 2 excellent recent victories, very close victories over Pedro Guevara and Ganigan Lopez, and he has a fight against Gilberto Pedrosa coming up on December 30th on the undercard of Naoya Inoue's next fight against Yaron Boyel. But that'll be for another video. As for Milan Melindo, other Fighter of the Year candidates, there's Shisaketsu Rungvisai with the 2 wins over Roman Chocolatito Gonzalez. First one by decision, second one by knockout, vicious knockout. Beyond that, most of the other fighters in most of the other divisions, to me, just haven't been active enough. Vasyl Lomachenko, who has wins over Jason Sosa, over Miguel Mariaga, and over Guillermo Rigondeaux. But difference there is those guys weren't on the level for the 130-pound weight class. 2 of them were actually moving up, as the likes of Taguchi is at light flyweight. I mean, this is for the Ring Magazine Championship right here. This is number 1 versus number 2 according to the Ring. And according to the TBRB, it is number 4 versus number 5. Yeah, they rank Kenshiro, Pedro Guevara, and Kosei Tanaka over these 2. But definitely high stakes at stake for this division. Arguable lineal championship here. But like I mentioned before, I'll cover some of the other guys in other videos. I just wanted to put it out there in the ether that Milan, the Method Man Melindo, is coming for Fighter of the Year. Let's see what he's got. Peace.